Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. And thank you for coming back to listen to Queen Andraya. Today is National Love People Day, which is interesting because we have Valentine's Day, but that's a different kind of love. This, I think, is just supposed to mean you love everybody, which is kind of cool because everybody needs and deserves a little bit more caring. So it was kind of a good little thought today to be a little bit more thoughtful to people around me. So there you go. Food for thought. Anyway, this episode is Chapter 35. Here we go. Chapter 35, Peacebreakers. Peanut galloped with heavy hooves through the dry yellow fields. Andraya's legs ached and her back cramped from being in the same position in the saddle. But she was grateful Steffan had offered to take the reins. At least now the strain in her shoulders had eased. To keep her head from ramming into Steffan's, she tightened her arms around him and rested her cheek on his back. The tall, prickly weeds of the fields whipped against her ankles as they raced along. The queen glanced back at her enormous bodyguard riding his gray thoroughbred. Hudson appeared to be enjoying his ride much more than his horse. The poor beast. That was quite the load he was carrying. A smile flashed across Andraya's face when she spotted a village in the distance. Peanut clopped along and eventually slowed her hooves, then came to a halt just in front of a large water well. The prince hopped off the horse with ease before assisting Andraya to the ground. He kissed her forehead, then quickly snuck a kiss on her lips. Hudson pretended not to notice, and the two men tied up their horses to the wooden poles of the well's covering. The queen glanced around at the small square homes, which all appeared to be made of adobe and built exactly the same way, although some were built on top of each other and some were not. Dirt roads separated the long lines of homes. "How far do we have to walk before we find the first market?" Andraya asked. "There are no markets here. The villagers try to give and share all that they have, to remain equal as they see it. That is why they call themselves the Sami, which means the same." "Interesting. Do you really think they will help us?" "I believe they will," said Steffan, but Andraya could hear the doubt in his voice. He held her hand as they walked in silence past several homes, with Hudson following behind. Most of the front doors were decorated with strings of beads and feathers. Andraya did not know how Steffan could remember which door he wanted, but without any wrong turns, he brought them to a home that was slightly more decorated than the others. He knocked on the door with a hard fist. "Hello there!" Not a moment later, an older, tan-skinned woman with hair as black as Andraya's opened the door. She wore a loose, colorful dress with a long necklace made of painted owl talons. One look at her visitors, and the woman's entire body stiffened, her face guarded. "Teska, it is I." The prince placed a hand on his chest. "Steffan of Andraya, you fed and cared for me over a decade ago. Do you remember?" Teska eyed the prince very closely until Andraya could see recognition spark her countenance. The old woman lifted an eyebrow. "You mean the prince who came here in disguise to escape the Sandrian palace?" "The very one," Steffan said with a smile. "The prince who could not speak a lick of Chaldean?" she asked in a suspicious tone. "Well, I have been tutored. I traveled to Chaldea itself, actually," he said, glancing at Andraya. "And—" "Oh, enough of that," Teska said with a wave of her hand. "I don't care. Just give me a hug." She pulled Steffan in for a warm embrace. The queen shifted with discomfort. Why did all the cultures here hug so much? "I see you are in commoner disguise once again," said Teska, glancing over Steffan's worn clothes and dirty hair. "But just look how handsome you are," she cried, patting Steffan on the cheek. "And so grown up." Steffan laughed, then grabbed her hands and held them down by his waist so his face could be free. But he patted them politely. Then he turned to the queen. "This is my love, Andraya. She is—" He hesitated for the briefest of moments before saying, "the Queen of Chaldea." Teska's smile faltered as her face froze in shock. Steffan responded with a furrowed brow, then suddenly cried, "Oh, the King of Chaldea has passed, Teska." Teska let out a hefty breath. then smiled, placing a hand on her chest. Of course. I should have guessed that, knowing you. She turned to Andraya with wide open arms. If Steffan loves you, you are family to me. She pulled Andraya in for a hug. The queen stiffened, but patted Tezca on the back. Do you not give hugs where you are from? Tezca asked the queen. We do, but only after a proper relationship has been established, Andraya replied. Steffan swallowed and pursed his lips. Tezca straightened her posture. Well, the Sami treat everyone as family, if they come in peace. I see, Andraya said, forcing a smile. Come for a walk with me, Tezca said, stepping outside and closing the door behind her. She stopped short as she spotted Hudson for the first time, taking in his massive frame. Yes, this is Hudson, Steffan offered. But before Steffan could continue, the door swung open again. A hunched-back man with a wrinkly face and beady eyes stood in the threshold, leaning on a walking stick. His clothes hung ragged, and he reeked of fresh rum. The Queen of Chaldrea, you say? The one who wants to make us slaves? He rumbled, his voice abrasive and loud. Andraya inhaled a deep breath. Not this again. Oh, Papa, please, Tezca said calmly. We must get to know her. I will not get to know her, her father shouted, tossing his stick right at the queen with shocking force. Hudson somehow caught it, then cracked it in two over his knee and tossed it aside. Andraya's heart leaped to her throat, then sank back down again. Tezca's eyes bulged along with her father's. Steffan stood in front of the queen, but remained as calm as ever. Let us talk about this. I can explain anything and everything you wish. All of them stood with tense silence. Just when Andraya thought Tezca's father would listen, he shouted at the top of his lungs. Peacebreakers! Peacebreakers! Stop! Steffan shouted. We come in peace. Let me explain. Suddenly, several men and women appeared on the neighborhood porches. And before the queen knew it, 2 men charged toward them. Andraya had no idea where they had come from. Her heart hammered, yet her feet were frozen. She watched with large eyes as the 2 men fast approached. Hudson and Steffan both blocked Andraya from view. Each of them easily sidestepped the charging persons, and in no time Hudson had them both in a headlock. But Tezca's father continued to yell, Peacebreakers! Andraya glanced around in horror as countless men from homes and fields suddenly sprinted toward them. Steffan grabbed Andraya's hand and tried to run, but even more kept appearing from all corners of the village, and they were soon circled about by a throng of them. Although they were all of various shapes and sizes, every one of them held the same stare of rage. The queen managed to stay standing despite her trembling knees, but her sides split with terror as she tried to catch her breath. Friends, please, Steffan bellowed. We come in peace. I am the Prince of Chaldrea. You have honored my word before. A short, beefy man spoke up. That may be so, but we always honor one of our own before another. He gestured his head toward Tezca and her father. Steffan turned to Tezca now. Tezca, please. We are here to— Don't listen to him, shouted the beefy man. I say attack. They all gave a high gusto yip and darted straight for the queen. Steffan threw a few punches and Andraya a few elbows until Hudson suddenly lifted Andraya onto his high shoulder and bounded in the other direction. 3 men attacked Hudson all at once, but with the strong speed of his massive body and his free gigantic fist, coupled with a few of Andraya's measly kicks, they made it out of the crowd. Hudson ran faster than Andraya thought humanly possible carrying a grown person. She clutched his neck and shoulder with all her might, and Hudson gripped her legs so hard she thought they might break. Finally, they reached Peanut, who neighed nervously when Hudson ripped off the attached rope and threw Andraya on the horse's back. He heaved himself up in front of her, and they sprinted back the way they had come. Andraya could not reach around Hudson's waist, so she held onto the saddle with all of her strength. She cranked her neck around to look back at the village. All she could see was a crowd of frantic people. Steffan! She shouted against the wind. She turned and yelled as close to Hudson's ear as she could get. We have to go back for Steffan. Hudson said nothing, but pushed the horse harder. Please, Hudson, we must. Hudson shook his head. Yes, she screeched. He needs our help. Your safety is my first priority, he growled. Andraya moved to jump off, but Hudson's long, strong arm reached back around her to prevent her from doing so. But what will they do to him? She said, suddenly weeping. She bowed her head into Hudson's back. What will they do to him? The horse jolted up and down as her body shook with violent sobs all the way back to the city. And that concludes chapter 35. I hope you are enjoying Queen Andraya, and please come back next Thursday to listen to more. And don't forget to visit brendasbooks.net. And as always, have a wonderful week. Until next time, take care.